Hi, my name is Sunita Kaul. I'm here in the studio with Sumita Singh, who is the Deputy General Manager of Indian Oil Corporation. More about the corporation later on, but first about corporate communication, what it stands for. It means a whole lot of different things to different people. But in today's world of social media and of news traveling at the flash of a lightning, it is one of the most difficult portfolios to handle for anyone, especially if you are with Indian Oil Corporation, a government-run organization where the stakeholders are the government, and you have to follow an agenda that is set by the government. So what does communication actually mean? There is internal communication, there is external communication, there is formal communication, there is informal communication. There's a whole lot of definitions and subsets of communication. However, today we'll not make it pedantic at all. We're just going to look at what external communication means for a government organization like Indian Oil, which is under the Ministry of Petroleum. It's a Fortune 500 company. Its portfolio is so diverse, it's amazing. Refining, production, I guess, as well,
Yes.
and a whole lot of stations where you fill up your fuel. So, Sumita, thank you so much for sparing the time to be with us today. I would first begin the interview by asking you, how has the definition of the stakeholder changed over the years?
Thank you so much, Sunita, for having me and giving this opportunity. As you have very rightly and aptly summed up, the role of corporate communications in terms of enhancing the brand of a company, especially in the current times, is really pivotal. And so, and stakeholders, when it comes to our stakeholders, so all the efforts are in fact towards the engagement of our stakeholders. So coming to how the definition has changed, so we have seen this transition of how our communication channels, how our platforms have in a way transformed literally in a couple of decades, so to say. We have worked in a time where now what we call as traditional media was ruling the roost, and in those times, I think things were really one-dimensional, if we can just equate it. And the channels of passing on the communication were not as diverse as they are. So, for example, if there was an event or some major milestone achieved by a company, so the most common way of disseminating that was perhaps drafting a news release. And I think we have all seen and grown and done that also. And that used to be the key means of communication. So you drafted a press release, and I remember a time when even the youngsters, they used to go over to, for example, in Delhi, to the INA, where all the major media houses were, and we used to hand deliver it. And next day, we waited for how the news pans out. Apart from that, there were other sources. There were the television was there in a very limited way. Television news was there. There were more of interactions, like press meets were there, where the key leadership used to address annual press conferences, and they were looked forward to by everywhere, by all the stakeholders.
Right.
And so I would say that media, the press, was a key in disseminating our communications. But over the years, now that we are firmly into the digital era,
the media has been sidelined, you mean?
No,
Yes.
it has not been sidelined. I think the first and foremost, the pros, if I can say, of digital media was, and it still is, that it democratized the entire space. Though it has its flip sides, but now the coverage, so it's not dependent on just one group of stakeholders. In fact, now I think we have come to a time when even the traditional media feeds on the digital media. If you see a lot of news which is generated by, say, the newspapers, they emanate from the sources digital media. They report what, say, a particular celebrity has tweeted, or and in fact, majorly now, the news first arrives on
through
tweets.
tweets. Yeah.
Tweets have now become what a press release
What
used
about
to be.
LinkedIn? What about other sources like Facebook, Instagram? They don't matter, or
No, they do matter, and I believe that, in our experience, all these platforms now have. I mean, for digital media, it's still a phase of evolution, I would say,
absolutely.
and everyone is trying to find their space. Now, the space in terms of, I think there are different target groups. So, for example, LinkedIn will have a very different and distinct target group, and thereby I think the key lies in curating or customizing the content as per the platform. For example, you cannot or you will not garner the same response for a content which is maybe perfect for a LinkedIn post, but if you put it on your X or on Facebook, then it might not get you the same response. So what I mean to say is, now there's a very distinct demography also, which has latched on to a particular social media platform. And so I think this is how the definition also of our stakeholders has changed. And now the interesting interplay is how different platforms require different content curation, because the demographies and are different. For example, the millennials, the Gen Zs, the Gen Alphas, I think everyone can be now more or less be identified with a particular favorite social media.
But one thing that strikes me is, for instance, if it's any social media, whether it's X or it's LinkedIn or Facebook, the thing that strikes me is, how would you get, let's say, a X generation or a Z generation, or the younger generation, interested in the workings of Indian oil? Or that must be a challenge, because how do you reach them?
So, as I said, we realize that, one content fits all, that age is now long gone. As you said, that, in the pre-digital era, just one press release, the maximum value add which was done was, maybe it was translated into different languages, and that was supposed to be a great value add, so that it reaches out to different linguistic groups and has a wider reach. But now, the way our stakeholders they consume content is very different. For example, even we have realized that even leveraging a certain aspect of the company, for example, apart from the energy business, we also have a huge social impact. We have many initiatives, for social impact. We are working in the field of biodiversity. In fact, this cheetah relocation program of NTCA is being supported by Indian Oil. We have a number of CSR initiatives. So what we have realized, that every group, every demography reacts differently to different contents. So maybe, the Gen Zs, they would respond better to, they are very invested in, the beyond business initiatives. For example, the sustainability initiatives, what the company is doing to preserve the sustainability,
the CSR,
the forest cover, the CSR, corporate social responsibility, environmental responsibility. And they kind of would like to be made aware of and be engaged with these initiatives, these campaigns. So we designed different campaigns for different groups.
So how do you make it interactive? Because these days you cannot just be using it has to be an interactive platform to get that kind of attention. Yes. Do you make it that way?
So, for example, campaigns involve the stakeholders also, right? So they might be asked to, say, upload a certain video if they visited a certain retail outlet of ours. So, and they are given a platform to voice their opinions. So that kind of makes it interactive to the extent possible, because again, social media being a mass platform, cannot be curated too finely. But we did get a good response, and also because we have a very large family base also. So we have almost 30,000 employees. Their families are there. If we see the extended network, then it comes to around 6 lakh. So even for reaching out to IOC family, social media has proved to be a very good platform, because a strength of 6 lakhs plus their families makes it a huge group. So for example, the children of our IOCs, as we call them, so we curated a campaign called Speak Up for the Planet. So we invited little children, and we got responses from, say, a 3-year-old to an 18-year-old.
Oh.
And they were asked to share a video on how the planet should be preserved, why it should be preserved, because they are the future citizens.
Right.
And it got an overwhelming response. So we first floated it on our internal platforms, which was also shared on the external social media platforms. So that really proved to be a good point of engagement and then we had responses from the outside stakeholders also on such videos.
How would you define your stakeholders? It's basically the government that does the most of the, of course you have your own revenue generation, but the government holds the majority stake.
Yes.
How do you, is it all internal? Of course they would be watching all this external thing that have the external communication.
Yeah, so I mean, for a business like ours, the stakeholder base is really huge. And diverse will be an understatement. So just to give you an idea, a person who takes his or her car to a fueling station is also a stakeholder.
Absolutely.
There might be, a rural woman in the hinterlands using our Indian gas cylinder.
Absolutely.
Who would have got it through Ujjwala or otherwise. So she is a stakeholder. There are our beneficiaries of CSR across the country. They are our stakeholders. The major airlines, the global airlines,
right,
who use our fuel and whom we refuel, they are our stakeholders. We fuel the armed forces. So we are almost the 100% refuelers for the army. And
let me butt in here. Sorry,
yeah.
I was very impressed by the fact that you have the highest fuel station in Ladakh, which is
Leh.
It's right. That's right.
Yeah, that's right.
One or many?
That is the highest, but that's not the only one. So even when you go to the Himalayas, the far reaches in Leh, we have a number, not just fuel stations. We also have our aviation stations, and those are mostly for the Air Force. So sometimes there are those exclusive stations only for the Air Force. We have our entire team which is fueling them because they need the fuel.
But there you go. You are such a monopoly. I mean, in terms of it's so much easier for you.
No, it's not
You're
a monopoly.
To defer there. Okay.
I'll give you an example that it's not. See, these are not commercial outcomes. If it was so easy to set up a fuel station at the highest reaches of Leh, there would be a lot of other private entities also vying for it. But there is a reason why there is no one else.
Is there revenue? Is it the revenue?
There's no revenue involved in that. It's so difficult. The logistics are so difficult. Okay. So it's not a commercial intent. When we say that we have over 37,000 fuel stations, not all of them work due to revenue. Also, let me tell you that, whenever the business aspect of it suffers, I think it would be enough to take on some statistics and see that it's only the PSUs who continue fueling. There have been times when there were global meltdowns, when the crude oil prices went through the roof. They went over $100 a barrel.
Right.
And I think it's no hidden fact. It was out there that, the private fuelers, they shut shop. And for a long time, very recently, when the Russia-Ukraine conflict started, again, there was huge turbulence in the crude oil prices, even in the supply. And what happened was that suddenly the private fuelers, they stopped retailing the fuel. As a result, Indian Oil and the other OMCs, they were asked to recoup for the gap. The country can't run if there's no fuel. And we had to buy fuel from outside and then supply it, and obviously it came at a loss. So all of it is, when you say monopoly, I think if it was such a hunky-dory situation, everyone would have opened a fuel station in Leh.
Do you buy oil? You have some oil fields as well now, right?
Or we have some oil fields, but India is not very blessed when it comes to oil. So we, because now we have moved from just a petroleum company to an integrated energy company. Yes. So we do have our stakes in exploration and production in India, as well as we have taken outside stakes in outside oil fields also. But essentially, it is the downstream. I mean, that is the refining and
that's your
marketing.
Main business. It's that's not so much product. Oil exploration.
Yes, and now moving towards green avenues also.
How do you get? So you have stakeholders in terms of people who are invested in you, whether it's the government or whether it is companies like ONGC. If I'm not mistaken, they have a stake as well.
So government is our largest stakeholder, and there have been arrangements. Because all of them are PSUs. Right. So even in some companies, LIC is also a stakeholder. So that's kind of, the equity, which is basically on behalf of the government. Right. So those are our major
So how do you
reach?
Do they ask for a lot of, do they have to be communicated with a lot, or is it all internal, not external?
I think that is a very firm mechanism which is in place and which is between the company and the government. So for that, we do not require communication channels or external communication channels. But yes, there is definitely a synergy. For example, in social media, because government owns our stake, and also by the fact that more than that, that we are aligned with the government's energy mandate.
Absolutely.
So that synergy reflects in our communications also. So, for example, if there is a new refinery is being inaugurated, or some new green fuel facility is being inaugurated, so definitely government is involved, our ministry is involved, the minister is involved. So that communication is also integrated in terms of disseminating it or amplifying it. See, I'll tell you one thing, why we don't feel this is a hindrance is, if you go back into, and it's a very interesting history, into the history of oil, and how history of oil in India, especially. Right. So as you would be aware that, before independence, there were these multinationals who were supplying all the oil, and there were 2-3 major oil majors, as they were called. So after gaining independence, the same continued, because India had so many other challenges to look at. We were we hardly had the foreign exchange which was required, and so these companies continued fueling the nation. But there has to be a reason why an ardent need was felt. Right. That we need to have PSUs in not just oil and gas, but in every other strategic business, be it steel. So SAIL and all these companies.
GAIL, SAIL.
Yeah, GAIL was a later entrant, but Steel Authority, ONGC, Indian Oil. So they came because there was an express purpose which was felt, and after I think facing a lot of challenges involving the multinationals, I think the pioneers of the country, the leadership of the time, decided that it's high time that strategic businesses like oil are diversified and national oil companies come into being.
But you don't have any competition in many of your businesses. For instance, of course, there are a few.
No, I think there's competition in every business.
Fuel stations, of course, I know.
No, I mean, everywhere we have competition. Not just from the other oil marketing companies, but from private companies also. And they are there in every sphere.
Only in refining, I guess.
No. Even in refining,
you have Reliance, and you have
Reliance. You have Naira. Reliance is tied up with BP in bringing up and spreading the fuel stations. In aviation, other companies are there. So after 2000. When the administered price mechanism was done away with, it's been a level playing field, so to say. Though I would say that level playing field is in terms of business, but where I gave you certain instances where the PSUs and the OMCs had to step in. So that, we have to understand the intent with which companies like Indian Oil came up. It was to serve the nation. And this isn't just, these are not mere words. We see it every time. So why do you think that, wherever there is a calamity, right, from wars, even in Kargil wars, we had colleagues, who drove those refuelers up at the heights and be there when the soldiers had set up their tents. And they were required because they were required to fuel. And they were almost on the front lines. So why, if it's such a monopoly, then it's an open field. Anyone else can also step in and do the same.
Are you worried about the government one fine day waking up and saying we allow private equity into the energy sector? I mean, there is a little bit like refining, as I said, it's marked.
Yeah.
Or but are you worried that this could be, there could be?
From whatever we have seen happening, equity and the players are already there. But I think the PSUs, and it's not only about Indian Oil or the oil sector. I think India has progressed and seen that a strong public sector will always be, the best bet for the country.
But don't mind my saying it, it's at the cost of a ballooning deficit, budget deficit. It's no secret that most of the countries, even Saudi Arabia, which is the major producer of oil, even they have these deficits because somewhere down the road you're subsidizing. Even in India, there is subsidizing of oil prices. You're not selling it at the rate.
But now the subsidy, now after, the oil prices, they are now at the market rates, and even the government has said that. So, it's not, so the companies, they bear whatever they bear. So we are in the business of oil.
Yeah, but the mandate is that there'll be a mass rioting if prices go higher than what.
But it has never happened.
You do increase prices the government does increase
so now,
once in a while.
No, it's not the government. So now the oil prices are linked to the crude prices. So, every, after a certain frequency, all companies, and it's not only Indian Oil, all OMCs, the prices, they change. There is a certain, it's there on the website. It's a very transparent process.
But you add your own funds as far as refining goes, and that is not taken into consideration.
No. But that is, the part of a business. When we run a business, we have our refineries, we have our pipelines, and they're all very, cost-intensive businesses.
Very cost-intensive.
Yeah, but it's the same for any other business. You draw equity, there are financial institutions. So it goes for
except that the
us
return
also.
On equity has to be much more so that the shareholders stick on.
Yeah, so, but now, if you, very recently we had our AGM, and the statistics which came out was that for 23-24, our market cap reached its highest.
Yes.
And even our share price was the highest, even if we compare the last 4 years. So, that shows the shareholder trust also in the company and whatever it is envisaging and whatever it is doing. So I think on that front, but as I told you, I'll go back again, that and we adopted this as our core value, nation first.
Right.
So, again, I'm saying that unless for a country like India, India is not a developed country like those small European entities. Right. So that's why in the government also, I think last 8 to 10 years, it very clearly spelled out that energy map for India cannot be aped from a European country. We need to have even for transition, we need to have our unique roadmap.
So coming to transition now, as you said, Indian Oil is also aware of the commitments of the government to the World Environment Organization. What are you doing what's your stake there in the non-conventional energy?
Right. So, this transition is not something which will happen, in a year or even 5 years. It has been continuing for some time, and it's a very slow and steady process, not just here, but around the world. you have seen how, maybe the smaller European countries, it was said that, there were a lot of countries who had completely switched on to renewables, say wind energy, mostly in small European countries. But oil is one entity which, is hugely affected by what's happening around, by the geopolitics. And I think those of us who have been observing the recent geopolitical conflict, it was, I think it was very surprising for some to see that the same European countries had to go back to not just fossil fuels, some of them had to lean back to even coal.
Right.
So, this is something which really shook the world. And I think now everyone realized that, it's not just the switch of a button, which can, because it is impacted by so many factors around us. So coming to us and India, India committed to go net zero on in the Corp platform by 2070. And it had a five-pronged, it was called Panchamrit, what was spelled out. And it had very clear demarcations that how it will come through, like enhancing the renewables, enhancing the renewable energy, especially solar, wind. And that blueprint was there. And I think every company, every stakeholder should align with this vision, because having a sustainable world is the need of the hour, and it's imperative come what may. So Indian Oil, being a key major energy company, also has aligned itself to that vision, because energy becomes a major part of the transition. So we announced our net zero goal by 2046, again in stages for operational net zero. That means for our majorly our, if you see the refinery operations,
Absolutely.
they are very energy intensive. So the focus is to, first pump in our focus on those areas, how to do it. And again, it's such a huge setup. So we need to go step by step, and we have a very clear blueprint to reach there. Whether it comes to the resources, apart from the refineries, we, being the largest energy company, we also have a very robust R&D. Our R&D center, it's in Faridabad, and it's basically, even for the government, it is a nodal center for the new and emerging technologies. So we have explored a lot of horizon technologies, as we say, the CBG, that is compressed biogas. So for a setting like India, which has an agrarian economy, it is seen as a key frontier for greener energy. So, we have already started our CBG plants, which is also helping the farmers, in terms of they are bringing the waste, and even in terms of ethanol. You must have heard that India has achieved a 15% ethanol mix in petrol. So, these are steps which are definitive steps, and they are actually happening. They are not on the blueprint. For Indian Oil, all of our retail outlets have a 12% mixing already at all its fuel stations, and now progressing towards 15. So apart from this, there are other pathways like, hydrogen bus. So we launched 15 hydrogen buses last year, which emit only water vapor. And those are hydrogen fuel cell buses. Hydrogen is still a very nascent technology, even globally.
Yes.
People are still trying to figure out, because storage is a huge issue in hydrogen and the costing. So, in India, we have taken this lead, and this hydrogen which is produced is completely green, which is being produced by our R&D center. So we are trying to create ecosystems, even for the other stakeholders, where they can, so that this transition and the pathways can be accelerated.
What about wind and sun?
Yeah.
And are you into it?
So India has, definitely. Even wind and solar, we had started investing almost 20 years back. And now, with now the focus on solar, a lot of policy changes have also taken place from the government. And you would have heard that India has been achieving all its solar energy goals. So definitely we are there. We have, and what we are doing is we are infusing solar and wind wherever possible. For example, many of our retail outlets are now solar powered. Our refineries, whatever new projects will be coming up, will take in renewable energy instead of coal based power plants which are needed to run the operations of refineries. So this is how we are infusing green into our businesses, and surely and steadily this will go up, and it will reflect India's alignment with the renewables also.
But then you'll have to create a whole new network,
Yes.
distribution network, which
Yes.
would mean you will have to cooperate perhaps with the local local electricity companies.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you have a hybrid system here where the local electricity grid can be used to transfer solar energy or wind energy. I'm not sure about that.
See, again, as you said, wherever we are, or any company, or even the country, the grid is the major issue. But what's happening is a lot of new companies, the startups, they are coming in with new solutions. It's very difficult to convert the old grid into green.
Absolutely.
So there have to be innovative solutions for that. And for that, we are tying up with a lot of these new age companies. We are tying up even companies, other PSUs like, NTPC and SJVN. They are also now exploring these greener pathways, and they have their green divisions. So, all these companies are collaborating together to make the grid greener, and finding out ways so that, for example, it's being produced, but how do you circulate it? How do you distribute it? So, for that, only one company or a company like Indian Oil cannot, cut much ice. But while we are trying to infuse whatever is available, we are also creating an ecosystem so that, for example, I'll just give you an example. There's a fuel called ethanol 100. So that is like 100% ethanol. So, so we recently, last year, launched that fuel on a pilot basis. So someone will ask that now the chicken and egg conundrum is that while we have the capability of producing 100% ethanol fuel, but then it's an ecosystem. You need vehicles, you need engines, you need a network. Only then, for our part, we have done that. But then what happens to the other part?
For a larger commercial scale, what
commercials,
happens?
Even that can happen. But why we have produced it is, it's also a statement, and it also, kind of motivates the other stakeholders to even start researching and, developing whenever the time is right. So, as an industry leader, we are taking these steps. Even in battery swapping, we have tied up with Sun Mobility. So these are again, the new age companies, the startups. We are open to, exploring new pathways. Right. So that, 10 years from now or 20 years from now, whichever pathway, gains traction, we will have everything ready and we can just scale up.
What's the worst criticism you've come across as far as the company goes and you've had to defend it?
See, I think these are, I think people have a very superficial understanding of a company, of an energy company per se. First of all, as I said, we have to understand that overnight, especially for a country like India, if you see, we are now exploring greener pathways. So for a company, it's only a matter of time that we can scale up. But we cater to people, at this point, for example, if the mandate was that, okay, green hydrogen will be the fuel, but then the cost, I mean, still the cost of, you have to think about, the last mile, the person at the last mile, will he or she be able to afford that fuel? So, there's I think that's a great vision of our country, that we have now a pillar called energy justice. I think 8-9 years back, when this new energy vision was drafted, that became a pivot. That you need energy justice for billions of Indians. We can't be what a small European country with maybe the population even lesser than UP.
But there is a worry that if you don't change, the market forces from other macroeconomic or macro manufacture, whatever you want to call it, will make you redundant. So, for instance, the market has changed completely in terms of how cars are being made now. It's electric vehicles, whether it's Toyota or whether it's Tesla or any other company. It's more non-conventional energy, or they're basically using a different kind of fuel or a different kind of system. So if this happens, if there are other things happening simultaneously in other industries as well, then you as an entity, I mean Indian Oil as an entity, will slowly become so non-profitable that
I'll tell you something. I already listed certain new pathways. So you talked of EVs. I'll come to the other part, which is still out there. Opinion is out there on the efficacy of EVs.
Right.
But coming to, even if we accept that, okay, EVs is the way forward. So we have already installed 10,000 EV charging stations at our fuel outlets. That is the highest in the country by one entity. Right, and this is much beyond the mandate which was given to the industry. So again, why someone will ask, you are a fuel company, why are you installing EVs? So again, there are two aspects to it. One is the future fuel fluent vision which the company has. Otherwise there was no use, because everyone it's a given that petrol and diesel are not going out in the next even 5 years.
Of course, there is no 10 doubt years, about it.
Because we are only at this time talking of our personal vehicles. What happens to those large trucks, those transport
But there's talk even of aeroplanes going on solar. So this may happen all of a sudden, a conglomeration of so many factors.
Yeah, we know that. And then, even for aeroplanes, we are setting up sustainable aviation fuel plants.
Awesome.
For blending, So we are there, you name it, and we are there. We are producing ethanol. We set up the first 3G, which is third generation ethanol plant in Panipat. It was in collaboration with an American company called Anzatec. That was the first of its plant in the world.
Right.
How does it operate? Is it uses the gases, of gases from the Panipat refinery and converts it into ethanol. Where is the feedstock coming from? The farmers.
Oh, you mean the
parali, which was being burnt, we encouraged them to deposit it, and it was processed. So that is the second generation ethanol plant. There are 2 ethanol plants. So, we are there, you name it, and we are there. In aviation, we are setting up SAF plants. So that so now there's a mandate, right? That by a certain time, say 2025 and 2030, countries need to mix the aviation fuel with blended fuel. For example, ethanol, greener fuel. So that is the mandate for the country. And so we are taking the lead. We are setting up ethanol plants, sustainable aviation fuel plants. You talked about EV. 10,000 EV stations already there. We are there in battery swapping. We are there. We are also, working on a novel technology for aluminum air batteries with a startup in Israel. And why we are doing it? One, to create that ecosystem. Second, again, our future vision.
Right.
Whenever we feel that oil now needs is not usable anymore, so we will have all these pathways. But Indian Oil does not operate in isolation.
Absolutely.
Indian Oil is part of the same ecosystem, right? And Indian Oil is there to serve our over 1 billion people. So, whatever is the mandate, we don't have the luxury of looking at only the commercials. Right. If we find that, okay, the petrol pumps are drying out, or certain petrol pumps have been shut because of commercial gains. We have to step in and supply fuel to the people.
For those people.
If there is a calamity, our refuelers traveled in Uttarakhand for hundreds of kilometers amongst those landslides.
But this is a very difficult message to communicate to people who have resentment that you are still, you still have majority of your business in the conventional oil sector.
Yeah,
how do you do that? How difficult would it be?
People have to see, we try to make them understand that people are still using the fuel. We are supplying that. Yeah. Tomorrow, it's easy for a business to say, okay, I'll shut down my petrol pumps. But then how will the country run? How will a person go to work? How will a farmer, till the fields? How will the homes, and hearths be lit up? So it's not a one-dimensional commercial entity. So our intent is to showcase this. We try to communicate that that we are firmly aligned with the mandate of the country to fuel the country, and not today. It's been there for more than 60 years. We came up with that mandate, yes, to fuel the country. When there was a danger that the companies which were there, the multinationals. Will shut shop, and they work for profit. I mean, they were there for a profit.
Absolutely.
Because any company which goes to another country will have the same intent. But we didn't come up for profit.
What is your hardest or your toughest battle been as far as communication goes? Any particular crisis that, what comes to your mind?
Being such a large manufacturing company, so we have 9 refineries, right? And then our network of pipelines, it's more than 20,000 kilometers. We have 61,000 touch points. So, having such a huge asset base, there are instances when, despite, all the systems in place, there might be some accidents. So, especially refineries are very vulnerable, to accidents. It's such a complex operational systems are there. So, that is something which is really, really, it's a challenge, because sometimes even our people become victims, of that. Our teams, even anyone who is there in our premises, that is something really heartbreaking. So that is a challenge at times. And I think the challenge per se is, again, to communicate that, what our intent is, what has been the reason for, or the purpose. So we have a purpose. We came up with a purpose, and it was a given that we will take forward that purpose. And whether in business or even beyond business, it is that purpose, which is the underlying factor. So that is something which we aim to convey through our different communications on ground, through the different channels also. And I think that's why we are on our feet all the time.
Is there anything else you'd like to add that you feel is changing or has changed in the way that communication is taking place now, whether it's internal? Of course, you mentioned the social media, but is there anything else that comes to mind?
Yeah, I do feel that for any business, for any corporate, this is our experience that, what we do beyond business is as important to convey. So what happens is, we normally focus only on, the business aspect of it, how much we have sold, and, where all we are, what is our spread. But we have seen that, and companies are doing a lot. We have seen the change which has brought in, which has transformation which has come in.
Right.
So I feel it is important to showcase that. One, because it inspires other companies also, to contribute. And I think a company like India requires, a country like India, I think all hands on the deck should be the mantra. And I think corporates, we do feel that, corporates have a responsibility to, go beyond the business. For example, we saw how, The Cheetah project, for example, it is such a huge project. We supported this, and it's very heartening when we see, the new cubs being born. And what we have done is, we have even showcased it within the company. So it brings a lot of pride amongst our internal stakeholders, our employees. And it is very important to align our own teams to a larger purpose. So, because, for large companies, even you have so many internal stakeholders that even engaging them is important before going outside for external stakeholders.
Absolutely.
So we have been able to do it. We raised the first women's corporate hockey team in the country.
Wow.
So so only railways and services had that, and the federations were really looking forward to it. And now these vibrant girls some of them are part of the national team also. So it gives great satisfaction. Or we have two very unique projects. These are called Parivartan and Naidisha. So these were crafted for the jail inmates, one for the jail inmates and Naidisha for the juveniles. So what happened was, we have more than 100 sports persons on our rolls. Some of them are current players like Lakshya Sen and Satvik, Chirag, Sharat Kamal, Manika, and some who have already, brought glory to the country, and now they are working in different fields of the company. So we leveraged their advantage. They fanned out to different jails, and they started training these inmates in sports.
Wow.
And it has been a phenomenal experience. Even we didn't expect. And now, these inmates say that, it has given us a new hope. It has given us a purpose. Even the juveniles.
So basically what you're saying is that corporate social responsibility is as important to communicate.
Yes.
And builds up your reputation. And
it builds up the brand. And also for the internal employees, it gives great pride and purpose. So I think that is both should be showcased. And also it's a great motivator.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful talking to you and getting to know so much more about Indian Oil than what we read or come across.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And it was great to talk on these things and discuss this with you. So thank you so much.
Thanks.